Congratulations on your new SILVERCREST Overlock sewing machine. This introduction video will give you an overview of the basic operation of the machine and is designed exclusively to complement and support the printed manual. For further information, please consult the printed version. Please retain the original packaging for the machine and keep the printed manual handy for possible servicing cases. Always disconnect the power cable when the machine is not in use and when you are carrying out cleaning and maintenance work. Never operate machine if it has blocked ventilation apertures. Keep the ventilation apertures of the machine and the foot pedal free from lint, dust and waste materials. Always check the plug and the power cable for any damage and arrange for damaged plugs and cables to be exchanged by authorized specialists or customer service. The accessories are in the accessory box on the left side of the machine. For a detailed list, please refer to the printed manual. Always set the machine up on a stable, non-slip and level surface. Ensure that your workplace is adequately lit. To connect the foot pedal, insert the plug of the foot pedal into the socket for the foot pedal and the mains plug into a mains power socket. Sewing speed is controlled via the foot pedal. The more pressure that is exerted on the pedal, the faster is the sewing speed. When you release the pedal, the sewing process stops. The supplied waste container collects the cut-off remnants when sewing. This keeps your workplace clean and tidy. To attach it, first push the two upper restraints of the container into the receiving slots. Then guide the two bottom restraints into their slots. To remove it, pull the container forward and then tilt it a little. Switch the machine off and disconnect the mains plug. Replacing the needles is easier if you first remove the free arm cover. To remove the needles, turn the handle towards you until the needles are in the top position. Then turn the needle screw with the supplied screwdriver until the needles are loose. You can now remove the needle. To reinsert the needle, first hold the needle with the flattened side to the rear. Push the needle as far as it will go into the needle holder and then retighten the needle screw. To make certain types of seam and to more easily operate the seam with adjustment wheel, bring the upper movable blade into a rest position. For this, press the upper knife to the right and rotate it until it is firmly seated. The machine is delivered as standard with pre-threaded white yarn. For a better understanding, in this video guide, yarns of different colors are used. Before you start threading, always place the mains switch at off and disconnect the plug. Behind the front flap there is a diagram with instructions for threading and on which the courses of the individual threads are marked in various colors. Open the front flap and guide the yarn of the upper looper, seen here as a red thread, from back to front through the thread tree. Run the thread into the appropriate thread guide. For this, pull the thread down until it slips into the thread guide. Hold the thread firmly. Then guide it between the discs of the thread tension selector and pull it down. Thread the yarn in the looper area as per the red markings. Then pull the thread from back to front through the upper looper and lay about 10 cm of thread behind the stitch plate. Guide the yarn of the lower looper, seen here as a yellow thread, from back to front through the thread tree. Run the thread into the appropriate thread guide. For this, pull the yellow thread down until it slips into the thread guide. Then guide it between the discs of the thread tension selector and pull it down. Turn the handwheel towards you until the lower looper stands on the far right. Thread the yarn in the looper area as per the yellow markings. Now firmly hold the yellow yarn with the supply tweezers about 4 cm from the thread guide and then guide it up into the thread guide. This done, run the thread to the rear and over the upper end of the lower looper. Pull it carefully down so that it slides into the recess on the looper. Turn the handwheel again so that the lower looper moves back into its normal position. The thread is now guided through the looper eyelet. Ensure that the yarn runs in the groove of the lower looper. Finally, pull the yellow thread for about 10 cm through the looper. Lay it over the upper looper and then behind the stitch plate. Guide the yarn of the right needle, seen here as a green thread, from back to front through the thread tree. Run the thread into the appropriate thread guide. For this, pull the green thread down until it slips into the thread guide. Hold the thread firmly. Then guide it between the discs of the thread tension selector and pull it down. Thread the yarn as per the green markings. Thread it through the right needle and then place it behind the sewing foot. Guide the yarn of the left needle, seen here as a blue thread, from back to front through the thread tree. Run the thread into the appropriate thread guide. For this, pull the blue thread down until it slips into the thread guide. Then guide it between the discs of the thread tension selector and pull it down. Thread the yarn as per the blue markings. Thread it through the left needle and then place it behind the sewing foot. When yarn has been threaded for the first time, or it must be rethreaded after a yarn breakage, please carry out a trial run. For this, use a remnant, which you no longer need. To set the stitch length, turn the adjustment wheel on the side of the machine. To find out which stitch length is suitable for which type of fabric, please refer to the printed instruction manual. The width of the seam can be determined by removing one of the two needles and using the seam width adjustment knob. For details of how you remove needles, see the section Inserting Removing Needles in these video instructions. To adjust the seam width adjustment knob, open the front flap. Then turn the seam width adjustment knob to the desired seam width. Orientate yourself on the scale on the stitch plate or follow the instructions in the printed manual. Upon delivery, the sewing foot pressure is set for medium weight materials. If you wish to use heavier or lighter materials, the pressure must be increased or decreased. To do this, insert the supplied small screwdriver into the hole on the upper side of the machine where the pressure adjustment screw is located. If the screwdriver is turned towards the plus, the pressure of the sewing foot increases. Turning it towards minus reduces the pressure. For this 4-thread stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. Use the adjustment wheel to set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for various fabrics, please refer to the graphic. For the 3-thread chain stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. For this stitch, you will need either the thread of the left needle, the upper and the lower loop thread, or the thread of the right needle with the upper and the lower looper thread. The 4th thread, which is not needed for this stitch, is to be unthreaded and the required 2nd needle removed. Set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. For the 2-thread overcast chain stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. For this stitch you will need the thread of the left or right needle, the looper thread plus the supplied upper looper element. The threads not needed for this stitch are to be unthreaded and the unrequired needle removed. Finally, insert the small wire of the looper element into the eyelet of the upper looper and the plastic bolt from the front into the hole in the upper looper. If you do not need to use the upper looper element, you can store it in the slot behind the front flap. Set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. All other possible variants for overlock seams can be obtained from the printed manual. When sewing roll hemmings, the fabric edge is folded over and provided with an overlock seam. For this type of stitch, you will need the thread of the right needle plus the upper and the lower looper threads. First, take out the thread for the left needle and then remove the needle. For details of how you remove needles, see the section Inserting, Removing Needles. For the 3-thread rolled hem, you must set the seam width switch at R. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. Use the adjustment wheel to set a stitch length between F and 2. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. All other possible variants for roll hemmings can be obtained from the printed manual. For the working of jersey, knits and other stretchy fabrics, it is necessary to use a gathered overlock seam, so that afterwards you achieve a smooth result. For this, it is necessary that the differential transport is set to a value greater than 1.0. The exact setting depends, however, on the material to be worked. Therefore, always sew a test seam beforehand. The following procedure makes it easier for you to change the thread. Cut the yarn still in the machine above the spool supports and place the new rolls of thread on the spool supports. Tie the ends of the new and the old thread together. Place all of the thread tension selectors at 0 and lift the sewing foot using the sewing foot lever. Pull on the other end of the yarn until the knots pass under the sewing foot. For threading it in the needle, pull on the other end until the knot is in the eye of the needle. Cut the yarn to the left and right of the knot, then carry out the rethreading. The SILVERCREST overlock machine has 2 sets of toothed rack feeders, which can move independently of each other and at different speeds. Using these, the fabric is stretched or gathered. With the aid of the differential transport, interesting effects can be achieved when sewing overlock seams on stretch materials and diagonally cut fabrics. The gathered overlock seam is suitable for the ruffling of sleeves, skirt seams and such like made of elastic materials such as knitwear and jersey. Please note that with this overlock seam, the individual parts should be brought together before sewing. Adjust the differential transport lever to a value higher than 1.0. The exact setting depends, however, on the material to be worked and the desired level of ruffling or gathering. Therefore, please always make a sample seam beforehand. The stretched overlock seam is suitable for wave and ruffle effects on decorative collars, cuffs and skirt edges and similar made from soft, stretchy fabric and knitwear. Adjust the differential transport lever to a value lower than 1.0. The exact setting, however, depends on the material to be worked and the desired level of frilling. Therefore, please always sew a sample seam beforehand. Hold the seam down with slight firmness before and behind the sewing foot so as to keep the textile under tension. To work tubular-shaped fabrics, such as sleeves or trouser legs, you can remove the free arm cover. If appropriate, remove the waste container from the machine. Slide the free arm cover to the left and then pull it off. You can now pull and work the textiles over the free arm. When you work with pins, always insert them to the left of the sewing foot. The pins will then not be a hindrance to the knife and they can be easily removed afterwards. Take note that you must never sew over the pins, otherwise the knife or the pins could be damaged. To prevent the loosening of the thread chain, thread the empty chain into a hand sewing needle. To secure the thread chain, now insert the needle into the end of the seam. The seam can be strengthened if it is sewn with a reinforcing strip. To do this, guide the strip through the slot in the front area of the sewing foot. Now place the strip under the sewing foot and to the rear and continue to sew the seam. To sew edgings, remove the right needle and the corresponding roll of yarn. Bring the upper movable blade into the rest position. Pull the cord inlay, it can be yarn or reinforcing strip, through the slot in the front area of the sewing foot. Now lay the cord inlay under the sewing foot and chain stitch the desired length. Please always bear in mind, before carrying out any cleaning or maintenance work, always switch the machine off and disconnect plug from the mains power socket. To clean the machine, use the supplied brush to remove dust and lint from the looper and knife areas. For cleaning the outside of the machine, use a damp cloth to wipe it down. Lubricate the machine regularly at the lubrication points shown here with an arrow. For this, use exclusively sewing machine oil from a specialist shop. Please ensure that before you exchange the knife, you always switch the machine off and disconnect plug from the mains power socket. You should exchange the lower knife as soon as you notice that it no longer provides accurate and clean cuts. Open the front flap and bring the upper knife into the rest position. First, remove the screw on the lower knife and then the knife itself. Slide the new knife into its intended holder and secure it. Bring the upper knife back into its working position and close the front flap. Switch the machine off and disconnect the mains plug. Replacing the needles is easier if you first remove the free arm cover. To remove the needles, turn the handle towards you until the needles are in the top position. Then turn the needle screw with the supplied screwdriver until the needles are loose. You can now remove the needle. To reinsert the needle, first hold the needle with the flattened side to the rear. Push the needle as far as it will go into the needle holder and then retighten the needle screw. From experience, we know that 95% of service cases can be resolved by the customer. This saves time and money. Here some common defects are listed, which you may be able to fix yourself. Please always remember, before carrying out any cleaning or maintenance work, always switch the machine off and disconnect plug from the mains power socket. If sewing needles are bent, blunt or damaged, they should be replaced with new ones. Needles that are not correctly inserted and secured can break. Therefore, insert the needles all the way and correctly into their retainers. If the material to be worked is too firm for the needle size being used, it may break the needle. Please make absolutely certain that you use the appropriate needle size for each type of fabric. Never pull too heftily on the material when sewing. Rather carefully guide the material with both hands. If the yarn is not correctly threaded, it can happen that the thread will break while sewing. Therefore, always correctly thread the yarn. If you have set the thread tension too high, this may also cause a thread to break. Rethread the yarn and set a lower thread tension. Also, check to ensure that the needles are correctly inserted into their retainers. Please check to see if sewing needles are bent, blunt or damaged. They should be replaced with new ones. Check to ensure that the needles are correctly inserted into their retainers. Under certain circumstances, it can happen that the yarn has not been correctly threaded. Check the course of the individual threads. Please also check to ensure you are using the correct needles. If the stitches are irregular, it may be that the thread tension is incorrect. Check and correct the thread tension. If the threads are sitting firmly, check the course of the individual threads. If the thread tension is set too high, it can happen that the seams create wrinkles. Adjust and reduce the thread tension. Please check to see if the yarn has been correctly threaded or if the yarn is caught somewhere. In the last case, check the course of the individual threads. Ensure that the differential transport is correctly adjusted. If the material is not being cleanly cut, it may be that the lower knife has become blunt or been incorrectly inserted. Replace the knife and insert it correctly. If too much material comes under a stitch, the edges of the fabric will ruffle. In this case, please change the seam width. The width of the seam can be determined by the removal of either the left or right needle and by using the seam width adjustment knob. For details of how to remove needles, see the section Inserting, Removing Needles in these video instructions. And now, Enjoy sewing with your new SILVERCREST overlock sewing machine.